Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Secret Origins of Mint Condition. I am one of your hosts, James, and joining me is Joe
How you doing, folks?
and Chris.
Hey, y'all.
And we are celebrating Batman Day this year, the 85th birthday of the Dark Knight, who doesn't look a day over 30 or 35. Joe, what is he supposed to be? 30, 35 Batman?
It depends on who's rebooting the DC universe and what iteration we're in. Rebirth, New Frontier, this new thing coming up now. Who knows?
I'm
He's
just excited
30-ish.
for when Dick's aging outpaces Bruce's, and at some
Yeah.
point Dick is like 50 and Bruce is still 37.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess he's as old as Chandler Bing. I don't know. Who the hell knows?
I always think of Batman like, was Superman's eternally, 30, right?
29 back in the day.
Oh, 29.
Now,
Okay.
now
Man.
now he's getting in his mid-30s. We don't know. It depends who the editor is and what direction they're going in that year.
And who the artist is too, right?
And who the artist, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It really does. Like we see different artists draw them differently, and it's like, oh, okay, you could see the age there, and other times it's like, I'm older than him now. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, it's Batman's 85th birthday. It's September, close to Halloween. We just heard that they are Jeff Loeb and various artists, because unfortunately we've lost the great Tim Sale, are doing Final Halloween. So in honor of Batman Day this year and the 85th birthday, we are talking about a book we've talked about in many episodes, but never talked about the whole book, the whole story. We are talking about Batman: The Long Halloween, the official, I think, direct sequel to Batman Year One, because Batman Year Two was not that good. And Chris, this is one of your favorite books of all time. One of them. I can't remember back when, like, episode 2 or 3 of this podcast is when we did our 10 favorite stories of all time. I don't remember where it ranks, but it's up there.
It's in my top 3. I'm pretty sure I ranked Kingdom Come as my number 1. I think that was going way back when. But yeah, Long Halloween is easily top 3 still after all this time. Periodically, I think about like maybe reorganizing those top 3. But honestly, God, I can't get it. I could read Long Halloween again and again and again and again.
This is my probably 4th or 5th reading of it, and I still got new stuff out of it. And I'm still like, I got lots of questions. I'm curious now because, like I said, this is an opportunity to actually talk about the whole story, because we've just done segments of it. So, I watched a YouTube video. Surprisingly, I never did this before as research of this podcast, just to get like an overview and the influences of it, behind the scenes of the making of it. Joe, you probably know this. I didn't realize that Archie Goodwin, this was like his masterpiece, that his like he had paired Loeb and Sale together back in the Legends of the Dark Knight for 3 Halloween specials, which I think are collected also.
They are. Yeah, they're collected.
And that led to The Long Halloween, and he wanted to make a proper sequel to Batman Year One. And Archie, I think Jeff Loeb got permission from Frank Miller to use the characters from Year One, so he could use Carmine Falcone and everyone else. So I didn't know any of that. But you probably knew all that, Joe, right? Like in real time?
I mean, I knew that Archie Goodwin was behind this, and this particular edition, I'm sure Chris is also is dedicated to Mr. Goodwin, who was a great writer and a fantastic editor. He was editor-in-chief for Marvel Comics for a while back in the day.
Oh, really? Oh, yes.
Just an amazing talent, Archie Goodwin.
Yeah. And so
it was it's funny because in my copy, my collected edition, the dedication starts with "It was all Archie's fault." That's how it starts. And it was interesting because Archie, he said, "I always liked what you two did with gangsters, everything about doing kind of film noir tale." And then they kind of pressed him what he had in mind. He's like, I just was sort of wondering what happened to the Roman and all those other gangsters from Batman Year One. I don't think Frank is going to revisit that material, and maybe you two should. So it was something that he had planned, and it was something that he really, like, he played, according to Jeff Loeb. They got played because Archie knew exactly what he wanted, knew the team he wanted to do it, and just kind of like dangled it out there. And then, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale absolutely took the bait.
which was his pairing, Dynamite Team. Like they're the
Yeah.
legendary. Like looking back, I mean, we've looked at this obviously many
Well,
times,
they
but
had
they were
both been
like,
in Marvel just before that. They were working on Wolverine and something else. Wolverine and
Mm-hmm.
Gambit.
gosh, but they were just working
Yeah.
on. They had moved to Marvel before this, which is interesting. But yes,
Yeah,
our pair.
yeah, a different dynamic duo, but a dynamic duo
Right.
nonetheless. But yeah, and reading this time, I mean, I always got it, but like really focusing on it, especially since we're going to do a deep dive. It's basically your favorite movie, Joe. It's The Godfather, except with
Yeah, I
Batman.
mean, they lifted lines and scenes right out of The Godfather.
Yeah.
In this book. Yeah, it's it's great. I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's been years since I read it. Probably about at least I don't know, maybe about 10 years. I'm not sure, but so I wasn't sure how it ended, to tell you the truth. And I have a couple of questions about that ending.
I have questions too.
I
Yeah.
think you might have the same questions, Jim. So Chris, you're going to be up at bat for that. But
I'll do what I can.
yeah, it's I'll let Chris start because he should. This is his.
Yeah, so Chris, I guess-
No, Joe, please.
All right. Well, for me,
Yeah.
it's obviously you already mentioned film noir, right? It is that, but it's done on an operatic scale. It really is, and at the same time, it's a very personal story, and I think that fits the book because the book is about duality. Obviously, with Mr. Dent being the central character, so it all
Whoa, spoilers, Joe. This book is only how old now? For
It was
anybody who
really-
doesn't know, we are going to be spoiling this.
Yes,
Like,
we'll be
the hell
spoiling
out
this
of it,
book.
so-
Yes,
Anyway,
this
I
was
think it's a given by now, isn't it? That we're
Yeah,
spoiling
yeah.
stuff.
I know. My jokes aside, go ahead, Joe.
No, it's as James said, it's basically my favorite movie of all time, The Godfather, and it works on many different levels. As I said, it works on a grand scale, but it works on a personal scale, and you get drawn into these characters. You dislike them, you vehemently hate some of them, you root for others, and it's just it's a grand work of art. It's one of the it's right up there with my favorite Batman story of all time, Year One. So that's my little what I got to say about that right now.
Yeah. Oh, Chris, I mean, what makes this like one of your top 3 books of all time?
Well, I just, like Joe said, it gets very personal. I love the mystery behind it. So frequently we see a Batman story. Batman's a detective, and we don't get to see him work out a mystery, right? Too frequently, we don't see him work out a mystery. We see him sort of like solve a crime, but it's not really a mystery that we have the privilege of experiencing. So I think the idea of like watching this unravel over see this yarn be spun over, it was 13 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just a little bit over a year if you're talking about living through the original release. I love that all the pieces are there, which is one of the reasons why sometimes I flip flop with my top 3 a little bit with Long Halloween and Dark Victory, because for me, solving the crime, solving the mystery in Dark Victory is like really really gratifying. But Long Halloween, again, we get this over the course of 13 months. I like that we get to see some of his different villains. I mean, we see Joker, but Joker doesn't take over the book like he so frequently does.
That's right.
There are 2 characters I always enjoy the story behind. One is Mr. Freeze. I always enjoy the story behind Victor Freeze and how he becomes Mr. Freeze, and Harvey Dent, because Two-Face as a villain is often not that interesting, right? He can be, depending on whose hands he's in, but sometimes it's just like, yeah, he's basically just used as a gangster, right? Just a super boss gangster. So I like watching how all of that goes. I love the way the story is told. I really enjoy Bruce Wayne and his dedication to the city in this that we see. And I love the entangling. It makes sense, right? Like, how is it that you would have powerhouse families with lots of money and influence in Gotham not become entangled? So it absolutely makes sense that Thomas Wayne at some point became entangled with Falcone, and then we see that happen, right? I love all the talk about family, even as Bruce is kind of missing his own. I love everything that Selena Kyle has to do with all of this, right? And there is a prequel that was written about Selena Kyle in the lead up to this. That was interesting. It wasn't anything brilliant, but it was good. So it's I think that's what it comes down to is I like the film noir feel of it. I like the different villains that are brought out. I like the story as it unfolds. None of it feels rushed to me either.
No.
A lot of times with these Batman stories, especially I would argue in the past 15 to 20 years, okay? A lot of these times by the time and in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, so feel free to clap back at me or disagree. I think it goes back to Batman Fugitive or Bruce Wayne Fugitive.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That whole arc where he was a murderer or accused of murder. And by the time we got to the end of I don't know how many crossovers with the other Bat books, and I think it took place over an entire summer, something like that.
At least, yeah.
It's something like that. I needed the entire thing explained to me. Like I needed all of it explained to me. And there's an entire issue where they just explain everything that happened. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll take your word for it. And it feels like that happens a lot with these big quote unquote mysteries. But in this book, it's not that. Like there's a twist. There's actually two twists.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't need an entire issue to explain it to me. So I don't think the story gets rushed. I don't think they try and cram too much in there. And I don't feel like it's too, even though it's a twist, I don't feel like it's gotcha. So I really enjoy it. I don't know if that answers your question or if I just got on my soapbox.
No. It does answer my question. It's interesting because I don't. They do a good job over 13 issues. I think that like they give it's Harvey's story, it's Jim Gordon's story, and it's Batman's story. Arguably, it's almost Jim Gordon and Harvey's story more than it's Batman's story. I think.
Arguably for sure.
Definitely Harvey's story, and you're right, Chris. I think, and Joe, you could probably disagree with this because you've read more Batman than either one of us, but I feel like we were saying like Two-Face gets used as a gangster, and I think sometimes writers forget like he was the district attorney of Gotham. Like they don't lean into the fact like he's a man conflicted because he's become the very thing that he was supposed to like prosecute and put away. And I don't know, maybe the characters have been around for a long time, but they kind of like move away from that and they just treat it like, oh, he's always been Two-Face. No. This was like a very conflicted person, which I think they capture very well in the last couple of issues of the Long Halloween.
Yeah,
which
sure.
again,
especially he turns himself in, right? I mean, he escapes, but he turns himself in. He meets Jim and Bruce and Batman on the rooftop, right? To close everything out. Like that's it. It's over. We did what we said we were gonna do.
Yeah. Joe, I have to since you did you buy this as it was coming out?
Yes, I did.
And when
did this come out again?
The year of 96 to 97, which is unfortunate year because I'm reading looking at some of my research. That was when Batman and Robin came out. So this
Oh, you mean the movie? Oh yeah, okay.
So the greatest Batman story of all time was coming out during the least favorite Batman story of all time.
Yeah, exactly.
But what was your reception to it? And do you remember what people in Mint Condition were reading? Were they reading it, talking about it at all? Or
96, 97, that could have been Mrs. Gross and Richie, right?
Just on the transition. Yeah.
Transition period. People were talking about it. People loved it. They loved the artwork. Everyone loved the artwork. We had seen Tim Sale before and other things, but this was his opus. This is his grand work. His pietà, I guess. But it was just for Batman, 96, 97. Yeah, Batman was big at that time, but he wasn't as big as he was going to become a few years later, or as he is now. Although now he's kind of like doing a nosedive along the rest of the industry, but that's another story. So I think people were excited about this. We didn't know if it was in continuity at the time. I think that came up a few times. But we realized this was this is a sequel to Batman Year One, and I think at that point, Batman Year One, which was about 7 or 8 years prior, was still in continuity. So now I don't know if this particular story is in continuity anymore. I don't think Batman Year One is in continuity anymore.
Well, I mean, I don't think it would be in continuity at this point because at this point, Jim Gordon has a son and it's his niece, Barbara Gordon. So we know that's not in continuity.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot that. That's right. Yeah. This is Barbara Gordon's niece, right?
Right.
But I'm trying. It's a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure people were psyched about this. Yeah, I know I was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember when I came to it. I mean, I think like by the time I was reading the graphic novels, it was probably like 2002 or something like that when we were
Yeah,
like working at the store and stuff like that. So
that's when I read it. Yeah.
it was always like it was already like a classic. Like I guess this is probably an instant classic. I'm assuming, you know,
Yeah.
like people knew that was a definitive Batman story. I mean, we also talked about continuity. I think was it Dawn of DC like said everything was in continuity. Like
Oh,
so, I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah,
Long
yeah.
Halloween is in continuity. It's just not in continuity.
Well,
Like
you have to
what?
define the particular Earth it happened on, right? Earth
That's a,
147. That's where it is.
that's exhausting.
It
Yeah,
really is.
The thing is, I like that I don't need it to be in continuity. I like that
yeah.
it's interesting. There's a channel, a YouTube channel that I'll periodically check in on, and it's called Cinema Therapy, and it's these two guys. One is a filmmaker, one is a therapist, and they'll go through different films, TV shows, and they'll dissect what's healthy, what's unhealthy, what they like, what they don't like, that sort of thing. And they do an episode that's all about like it's basically therapist versus Uncle Iroh, the ultimate therapist, and basically going through Iroh's advice, and the therapist is like, yeah, flawless. There's no criticism. Like he's right about all this stuff, right? But in that episode, as he's talking, they're talking about how Mako had died, and so they
Mm.
had to replace the voice of Iroh. Um, and one of the things they say is you can tell that it's not the same actor. Some actors will like play the accent, so they'll try and play the voice, and others will play the character. So even though like I think Greg Baldwin, I think took over Uncle Iroh after Mako died. But he kind of sounds like Iroh. He's doing a passable impression. He doesn't always sound like the character, but he always feels like the character is what they
Mm.
say. And that's how I feel about The Long Halloween, is that these characters, I don't need them to be in continuity. This can exist almost independently of continuity,
Mm.
and I'd still enjoy it because, like you said earlier, Joe, like this does explore the different characters. We get some of that without it feeling very exposition-y,
Yeah, exactly.
and so I don't need it to fit into continuity. These characters feel like the characters that they
Mm.
look like too, which I think is part of Tim Sale's gift, is that I don't feel like the feel of the character or the look of the character is at odds with the feel of the character. um, that's one of the things I really like about the story. I don't need it to be in continuity to really enjoy it, and for it to be like an integral part of, oh, I'm sorry, you were interested in getting into Batman? Here, I've got a suggestion for you.
Yeah.
Here are your required reads, and this is one of them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I didn't really like going into the story now a little bit, like watching the YouTube video, which is something I didn't quite pick up until this reading and hearing someone point it out. And you maybe both of you already picked it up, but I guess it starts off with Gotham being run by mobsters, and then it devolves into Gotham being run by super villains, which didn't hit me until like, oh yeah, because they like Two-Face ends it by killing Falcone, and then you have the room where all the super villains are taking over. And it's no
Mhm.
longer gangster run, which I don't know how many times I read this book. I didn't recognize that as one of the themes that was going on the whole time.
Yeah, I
Well,
didn't get
and
that either
you're
the
just
first
kind
time.
of you're guilty of the same thing that Batman is, right? Which is that Gordon at some point says to Batman, he says, there have been a lot more of these super villains showing up, and Batman says, "Do you have a point?" or something like that. And
Yeah.
he says, "Well, this really started after you showed up. Do you ever think about that?" And Batman just says, "No." And they move on to what they were doing. But that's the attitude. And I think they're going to see Calendar Man at the time or something. But yeah, you're seeing that evolution. It's the same one that we see actually in the movie Dark Knight, right?
Yeah,
Which is when Joker waltzes in, and the gangsters are like, "You're a freak," and he's like, "No, I'm not." And he ends up taking over the whole thing. All the gangsters end up dead by the end of the movie, and we see it, like you say, we see a lot of that here too. And then it becomes this thing, right, where at the very end, Alberto says, "I don't need anything from you. I'm bigger than you now. Look at me."
Yeah.
And he's exactly like these others, right? Down to a physical deformation because of the pounding that Batman gives him in the
Mm.
sewers, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, and that yeah, I did. Like I said, it took me a while to pick that up, and obviously the legacy of the Long Halloween is it influenced the Dark Knight, it influenced Batman Begins, it influenced the Batman, it which I looking back at it now, yeah, now I can really see it. Like when I was really originally watching the movies, I like didn't pick it up right away, but like it's been a little bit while since I've read this. I'm like, wow, they like took real swaths of the story and just integrated it into those movies.
Yeah,
when
well,
they
that's,
burn,
and that's go ahead, Joe.
so when they burn all that cash, right? In the book,
Yeah.
that scene's in the Dark Knight. Yeah,
Right.
all the cash
And
there.
that's one of the reasons I actually wanted you to start us off, Joe, because just like you said, James, when you're like, I was watching those movies, it wasn't until I came back and read that I saw how much it informed the movies. It's the same thing with you, Joe, with all the experience that you have with like film noir and with gangster films and stuff like that. Being able to say, that's
Mhm.
Brazzi, that's from The Godfather. This is that. Being able to see the influences, I think, makes it that much more rich because it is original material. But it's based on a form that people already know and are familiar with, and stories that resonate with people, which is just, again, more masterful storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it begins with the opening line is what I believe in Gotham City, right? Is that what
Yeah,
Bruce says?
yeah,
Well, that's
Thomas, but yeah,
Thomas Wayne, right? Well, the Godfather begins with "I believe in America." Bonacera, the Undertaker, says that, and there's lines like "Try to feel it's the best in the city." It's in this.
starts with a wedding.
Starts with a wedding, right? When the older Maroney gets killed, it's in his tomato patch
Hmm.
where Vito
Yeah,
Corleone
Lou.
died,
Yeah, in his garden.
his garden, right?
Yeah, Luigi
So
Moroni.
there's so many,
The Valentine's Day Massacre was
Yep.
almost the same in this
Yeah,
book as it was in real life. Or
yeah, yeah. It's a tribute to other media, which is can only enhance the product if it's done right, and this was definitely done right.
so I don't want to obviously audience spoilers. We're doing it.
Yeah, sorry if we spoiled it, folks, but
So
25 years.
was it? I guess the actual whose holiday is actually a little nebulous, right?
Oh yeah, throughout.
Like, do we? I don't. I mean, again, let's put Dark Victory aside. I don't remember enough of Dark Victory. Honestly, I have to reread
Neither
Dark
do I.
Victory now.
I have to read that now. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of just a long Halloween, I don't think we get a clear cut answer of who holiday is, right?
We do.
Well, it's holiday. We know Alberto had some. Who did he kill, Chris? He killed.
Oh gosh. He's the one. Oh
Oh,
man.
did he?
Because
No,
he
did he
doesn't kill
kill?
till the end. Because otherwise,
Right.
it's all oh gosh, what is it? Uh, Gilda? Is
Gilda.
that
Gilda.
Yeah, that
Gilda.
was my question. Like,
it's
was
Gilda?
Gilda like
It's
doing?
Gilda, and then it's Harvey Harvey takes over for Gilda. So it's not until towards the end that we see that um oh god, hang on, stand by.
So Harvey was holiday at some point too. I guess I
Yes,
missed. I guess I missed.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
Harvey
okay.
Harvey takes over for Gilda.
Remember what
Uh,
she? I forget what chapter it is. You're all wet, Harvey, when he comes home, and that's
yeah.
where he, I guess where he took out Alberto, right? Who doesn't
Well,
die?
when they thought he took out Alberto, yeah,
I thought he took
but
out Alberto, right?
right, because she
There's
was just trying to
also
get him to be done and come home.
I should
But
have marked it. There's a
go ahead.
panel in here, Chris and James, where I think Barbara, no, yeah, is it Barbara Gordon, Jim's wife?
Yes,
It is Barbara. Yeah.
And Barbara's his niece. She's visiting Gilda, and there's a shot, like a long shot of the window, one of the windows into their home, into the Dent home, and there's five uh, baby bottle nipples on the sill, on the windowsill. And when I saw that, and I remember who at least one of these killers are. I knew it was Gilda at that point because it was made plain earlier that the baby bottle nipple was used as a very crude silencer on the weapon that was, being used to kill all these Falcone people. So
Okay.
there's a lot of little clues in there that demands a second. Demands another reading. I'll probably read it again next week.
Yeah, it needs like an annotated version,
Yeah.
like with Jeff Loeb going like, oh, this is where it indicates that Gilda's killing, and this indicates where Harvey's killing, and this indicates when Alberto's killing.
Mm-hmm.
So Harvey was doing that. I just like to clear, like Harvey was intentionally taking over for Gilda, right? This wasn't like a split personality
Right.
where
No.
yeah,
Not at
this
that
wasn't
point. No.
because this Two-Face seems pretty grounded and like even though he's deformed, he's not like they're not playing him like split personality sort of. He's
Right.
like he's Harvey. It's just like now that he's like when he becomes Two-Face, he just lets that other side of him out. I guess that he's been hiding from everyone. Just do the work that he wanted to do all along, kind of.
Yeah, Alberto kills Maroni, by the way, at the end.
Okay, right.
That's
Yeah.
who he kills. I think the whole thing is at that point he figured out that Gilda was doing it, and he did not want Gilda to go to jail for it when she it's not like he was ever going to arrest her, so he took over that sort of that task. So
Okay.
it's kind of it's interesting because a lot of characters take credit for things they don't necessarily know or don't necessarily do, right? We see Harvey takes credit for some of the things he didn't do, as it turns out. We see Alberto doesn't. He's happy to say I'm Holiday, and now he's bigger than his father ever was, which is what he because his father wouldn't let him into the business. Alberto wants that, right? So Alberto takes it. We see the Catwoman is very coy about everything, right? She doesn't really want to share information. So it kind of it's that interesting thing of like people are very laissez-faire with the truth until they decide it matters to them, right? It's interesting.
It is interesting. It's also interesting that the Riddler can't. Like, does the Riddler figure it out and keep him to himself, or is the Riddler doesn't know either? Even like when Holiday almost tried to kill him.
I think the Riddler knows and keeps it to himself because he sees who Holiday is.
Okay,
we get the impression that he sees who Holiday is. But then you have Calendar Man who keeps switching pronouns and going he or she, but acting as though he knows who Holiday is, even though it's driving him nuts, right?
Yeah.
There's one whole chapter in here. I forget which chapter it is, but where it's everybody giving their opinion of who the killer is. Jim Gordon, Bruce Wayne, and that's really cool because you get that kind of in the middle, and it's like if you think it's this person, well, wait a minute, maybe it is the other person. So it's a great tool that the writer, the creators use to throw you off the scent, so to speak, which is every great crime mystery novel ever written.
Right. Right.
Does it to you constantly. Yeah. Don't let them figure it out too soon. I mean, they won't stay for the ending.
And kind of going back, like, so now, like, just diving, like you brought it up before, like, all wealthy families get entangled. Like, that whole story about how Thomas Wayne helped the Falcone family and, saved his father, and then Alfred gets involved with that whole story when they're, thinking about when they arrest Bruce Wayne. I was like, that was a, great piece to the whole thing. And also, like, the line Alfred actually says the line we talked about in our Mask of the Phantasm episode. It's like, if I had been a different type of father, maybe you would have turned out differently. Which I was like, I completely forgot about that line. That's like one of the few times Alfred actually reflects on his choices he made with like, Bruce Wayne in just like an outright way, not like sort of a more subtle way.
Well, and he does it again in Dark Victory when there's a really beautiful like side by side when they take in Dick and Bruce is never around and Dick doesn't know that he's Batman yet. And you can see the side-by-side comparison of how Alfred behaved around Bruce and didn't know, because to Alfred's credit, he didn't know how to be a father. But by the time Dick moves in, Alfred does know how to be a father. And you see the difference between the way he responds when they say, I'm alone now. When Bruce says, I'm alone now, Alfred doesn't know what to say and he just stands there and lets Bruce leave the room. But with Dick, when he says, I'm alone now, Mr. Pennyworth, he says, you're never alone. Right. So it's like, it's interesting seeing that characterization. But I do like, because Alfred really doesn't have a big part to play in this, but you get to see some of his cleverness because he absolutely knows what he's doing when he's in the courthouse. And like, he tries very hard to spare Harvey and Gordon the embarrassment of what is going to happen if they arrest Bruce Wayne, right? Like he keeps sort of calmly, he's never going to tell them he's not a murderer, but he's just kind of like hinting like you don't want any of this. And then sure enough, when he's in the courtroom, he says that thing about how, the Wayne's murder was never solved. Well, I guess not much has, maybe much hasn't changed in Gotham after all. And Gordon's like, oh, that one's going to hurt us. Like that one's going to cost us, Harvey. And I love that. I love that version of Alfred that we get that sees how he could have been a better father. And like what parent doesn't think that, right? With their one and only child. That it's like, if I had known then what I know now. So it is. We don't get much of Alfred, but I like what we do get.
Yeah, and it's the best part of Alfred too. I mean, it's the side that I don't know always gets put forth in the comic book pages. Like, he's he is, he's basically Bruce Wayne's father, and Alfred's a fascinating character, as we've talked about before, just because
Mhm.
he is basically Bruce Wayne's father. He's raised him,
It's very
but
true.
he chooses to remain the butler. Like, he doesn't have to put on that facade. He could just be the person who takes care of. But he chooses to, like, I guess because of his inexperience being a dad, hide behind his station with the Waynes originally
Well, and
like brought him in.
I think that's what Bruce would be comfortable with anyway, right? I don't think, because they don't really acknowledge it. And
Yeah,
Bruce is never one to acknowledge that stuff, right? Like, it's such a big deal for him to acknowledge any of it. And so it's like, all right, let's keep playing at the thing because Bruce can't use his words.
right. All the way up into 30s, 35.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. He's an ancient 35.
Yes.
A thought just struck me, so I looked it up online. A quote from a classic novel, because most of the families in this, not all, are very unhappy families, right? I
Hmm.
would say the Gordons are an unhappy family, but Jim's job keeps him away from his wife and his young child, and obviously there's epic unhappiness in the Falcone family, and in the Maroney family, and in the Wayne family. So I don't know if you guys ever read Anna Karenina by Tolstoy.
No.
No.
Okay, I'll just read the opening line. It's considered the most quotable line in fiction. All happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And obviously, there's so many unhappy families, and it's so true. And you
Yeah.
see it playing out throughout the course of this. I don't know if that was either of these guys read that book when they were in college, like I did, but it just struck me, when you were talking about family, Chris, that okay, now this is like good literature, pop literature, we talk about pop culture all the time, does often, take its lead from quote
Yeah.
unquote classic literature.
Yeah.
And I think this
Yeah.
is, I think this is right up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. You just touched on something like again the subtleties of the story. Like, we get a whole back. We get like Gordon's home life. We get Harvey's home life.
Mm-hmm.
And we get Bruce's home life. What we get to see all these aspects, and with his intermingling with Selena Kyle / Catwoman, we get to see a little bit of Bruce Wayne's love life or dating life,
Yeah,
or like
exactly.
how so they like just they hit on so many things, but it's not like extraneous. It's not, Joe, none of this feels like in 13 inch shoes, like with decompressed storytelling.
No,
It occupies the space it needs to like, there's no slow parts. I can't think of when I was reading this book, like, oh, we could have edited this, or we
no,
didn't need that, or anything.
it moves along at breakneck speed, but it doesn't leave you behind at any time.
No, I agree. Speaking of, you know what I actually do find really interesting about this book that I really like, and it takes, I don't. When was Dark Knight Returns? Was Dark Knight Returns after this?
You mean Frank Miller?
Yeah.
Dark Knight Returns? No, that was 1986.
Okay.
It's like 10 years
So,
before. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So they take a turn sort of away from Miller's Batman in a sense. I mean, year one we see Bruce dive off the bridge to save, James Gordon, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I really like it's such an odd choice, but I really like it. I like that when I think it's I think it's Maroney who goes down into the sewers and encounters Solomon Grundy.
Alan Grundy. Alan Grundy.
And and Batman goes down there and he doesn't start a fight right away. He says, I'm not here to disturb you. I'm here for the man who disturbed your privacy," and
Yeah.
tries to talk to him, and it doesn't work, right? And he ends up having to sort of like subdue Grundy, and Grundy sort of wanders off. And then because Bruce doesn't have anything better to do on Thanksgiving, he like leaves a meal
There's a mail
for
from him.
Grundy, right? And now that happens again in he does that a second time in Dark Victory, but he doctors the food with tranquilizers in an
I
effort to like
realize. Yeah.
get to some files that Harvey Dent had down there, right? But
Hmm.
it's interesting because they also lay the groundwork for the relationship between Harvey and Solomon Grundy. Towards the end of this, when like they encounter each other, Grundy starts saying his rhyme, and then Harvey finishes it, and that seems to placate Solomon Grundy. and it's really, really interesting. But that almost gentility that Bruce doesn't pick, Batman doesn't pick a fight he doesn't have to pick, runs very contrary to a lot of Batman we'd see anyway, but B, the way Batman treats so many criminals in this book anyway. Punch first, ask questions later. A lot of it is informed by rage. When you see how he like goes after Alberto, you see the way that he like yells in all caps when he thinks he's caught Scarecrow, but it's actually a dupe on a horse. He says, "Did you think you could just run away?" It's all caps, right? But with Grundy, there's it's I don't know. There's like a gentility to him. I don't know. I really I like the juxtaposition, and we see it slightly, kind of again when he's trying to get information out of Selina, and Selina's been helpful up to this time. Not as helpful as Bruce would want, but he's been help. She's been helpful, and she says he's got her by the wrist, and she says, "You're hurting me," and he lets go, and she's like, "That's better." Um, I like seeing Batman sometimes bang his head against something and go, right, why am I using force right now? Like it betrays a youth to him.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
And also like compassion is part of I think great writers recognize that Batman has compassion and can display it even when in costume, not just as Bruce Wayne. As we always point out in the great Justice League Unlimited episode, where not to I don't want to we've talked about that many times too.
But, that's what I need now is more tears. Thanks, James.
Yeah, but Batman has compassion, and he does, and he when he's younger, he doesn't know it. He uses some, like I said, there's plenty of stories that do the contrary, where Batman is ever showing his humanity or that he is human. But I feel like writers like Loeb and Wade and Paul Dini, they know how to strike that balance when the Dark Knight, or Mark Wade, especially when we just did that episode on World's Finest. Like he's not always the hard ass who's got to use force and brutality to get what he needs from somebody. So
no, nor is he always the brooding, self-involved, self-absorbed, bordering on the psychotic the way they write him today. He's every bit the detective here in this graphic novel, but he's at times he's frustrated because things aren't going the way he wants, or he can't see the puzzle, the entire pieces falling together. And that's the Batman I like to read about, the Batman that Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams brought back in the late 60s and early 70s. Not the Batman who can either put on that stupid Hulkbuster armor and punch Darkseid, I hate that, or the Batman that they're writing today, who's like, as I call him, Beta Man. He doesn't know who he is. He's always brooding and he's always full of self-doubt. He has self-doubt in this book, but it fits the story. It fits the world that he's operating in, because there's a lot of different things going on. And when you're a detective, not everything falls into place. I've watched a lot of these movies, Humphrey Bogart movies or whatever, and you can see it usually by the middle of the second act, either the third act, end of the second act. The detective is very frustrated. He can't pin this down.
Yeah.
And then something happens in the third act, and okay, it all falls into place. But it's not this self-absorbed, oh, woe is me, I have a terrible life. Well, you're freaking Batman. Act like it. And he does in this book.
Well, and I think too, I like when we're talking about self-doubt and stuff, I really like that between this and, again, Dark Victory, we get two different reactions to Scarecrow's fear toxin. Because in this book, when he gets hit with the toxin, he sees his mother being murdered again, right? And he says, right. "Run, mother, run!" And that's what Bruce does. Bruce runs from the police, and he's found sobbing at his mother's grave, right? Whereas in Dark Victory, and this is again, just masterful storytelling. In Dark Victory, he starts screwing up. He starts misremembering clues, and it's Alfred who catches him out on it. But he starts messing up the case because he's so afraid he's going to mess up the case, that he's not going to be able to solve this mystery, that it's going to be another Long Halloween. And in some ways, he looks at Long Halloween as one of his greatest failures. He thinks that all the clues were there. He should have been able to figure out it was Alberto. He loses one of his best friends, Harvey Dent, and one of the best forces for good he believes exists in this city. It's a whole year of people dying, and yeah, they're bad people, but he doesn't solve it, right? And so he's worried it's going to happen again. And so in Dark Victory, he gets progressively more unhinged and nasty around the whole thing. It's not until Alfred calls him out on it and identifies the problem that he goes, right, I was hit with Scarecrow's fear gas, and I just thought it didn't affect me. And it's like, right, I forgot that he got hit with it too. So I like that we get to see some of that trauma that still haunts him in this book and Long Halloween, that like he gets hit with the fear gas and he's very calm and collected. He's like, fear gas, don't inhale, right? Don't breathe it in. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's too late. And we see that what fear it brings to life, that trauma from when his mother was murdered.
Yeah. I also like that callback to, the when you were saying the fear gas and what he did in Long Halloween. He's running and he ends up at his mom's grave. It reminds me of the Mask of the Phantasm scene too, where he's at his parents' grave. And I can't remember which came out first. Was the Mask of the Phantasm? Like, I don't know who.
Mask of the Phantasm was 93, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mask of the Phantasm came out first.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they, if they pulled from the best.
It was made the year after the animated series premiered in '92. Yeah.
Yeah, because that Mask of the Phantasm sort of has some of that continuation of the mob families and stuff in it too. So
very much so.
Because when you look at Gotham, especially early Gotham, it really does track that like the freaks don't start showing up until Batman shows up. We know this, right? So it's at that point, especially the way that Gotham is built, it's the mobsters.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that, to me anyway, it makes sense that that's where it starts, and it works in that setting. Mobsters work in that setting.
Yeah.
Very much so. Now, James, we need to talk about the artwork, and you being the resident artist here. I have some things to say about it. I know we've talked about it before, but
yeah, no, I mean, it's obviously brilliant. Tim Sale's brilliant. I mean, he gives like the essence of every character. I mean, Tim Sale's style, it's kind of hard to pin down. I mean, he's got like, it's simplistic complexity is like I like to say with it, because it, having done a piece for Chris replicating some Tim Sale art, you look at it if you're an artist and you're like, well, I can do that. It's like, no, it's not easy to replicate a piece of Tim Sale's art and have it feel the same way Tim Sale. Even the few pieces I've done in Tim Sale's style, I still
You've done wonderfully. I know you're your own biggest critic, and that's cool, James. But you did a tremendous job. It is very clearly Tim Sale.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. If hopefully Tim Sale, wherever you are, I did try to do you justice. But it looks simple and stuff like that, and it's really hard to replicate. And but his style it's flowing, it's movement, you get the expressions. The villain, everyone's like hyper realized, but especially the villains. I mean,
that's Joker, and that chin you could melt somebody with that chin.
The Joker, and I guess Harvey Dent especially, because Harvey Dent is especially grosque. He's like one of the most grotesque versions of Harvey Dent is in this book. I mean, it's still done. It's still done obviously for a young audience to read, but it's pretty horrific. Like, you don't usually see Two-Face like look like that. But yeah,
well, he's very suggestive with some of it too, right? Like with Poison Ivy, it's mostly just Ivy that you see. You can see some of her body in there, and we see it with Mr. Freeze when he's inside that helmet. Not in Long Halloween. He doesn't show up in Long Halloween, but Dark Victory. It's interesting, I think, James, the juxtaposition between some of that hyper realized and some of that almost like vague. Like you can just barely see the silhouette of a character.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And he does it so well too. I mean, obviously, we all know reading this book what happens with Harvey Dent. But if you look at all the shading he does on that one side of his face, there's a lot of like the storytelling, like that Harvey is guilty or he's hiding darker parts of himself. Like they always, whenever possible, that the lighting's always on the other side of the face, and he's in shadow on that other side of his face. So. But then you get the splash pages, like when Batman, like we're talking about, has to fight Solomon Grundy. That's great. Like the anatomy on Solomon Grundy, and Batman in that fight is fantastic.
And you get Batman on a horse here too, also briefly, but he's on a horse.
Yeah. Well, all the splash pages are amazing. Like he saves that real detail work for the amazing splash pages. Yeah. And I think Joe, you told me we were talking about this. No, we were talking about Dan Moore, but. I don't even know the colorist, which is it's a sad story, but the colorist on this book is amazing too.
Gregory Wright.
Gregory Wright, yeah. Like shout out to Gregory Wright, who colorists don't always get enough, and I think enough praise. But I think the colors that were chosen for Tim Sale's art are excellent for telling the story. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
they fit the characters, they fit the mood. You said how it's a simple art style, and I completely agree with that. It's, I like to use the word minimalistic, right? But at the same time, you when you mention the splash page, it's very cinematic at the same time.
oh yeah,
So he's able to pull from all these different the techniques. And I thought there's a great use of negative space. We've talked about this particular artist and how he just
yes.
carves characters out of the background in light and shadow. And once again, since it's a book about duality, light and shadow. I mean, every time we see the calendar man, he's always brightly lit, right?
Yeah.
You never see the calendar man in shadow, but obviously Harvey Dent is in shadow, and so it just it's constantly changing. The mood is changing. The artwork is expressing the mood, and it's so much. There's so much that just draw you in, and you just becoming. I had to read it again now. And Chris, you mentioned something about Mr. Freeze. As I was reading this, I was like, where the hell is Mr. Freeze? And Dark Victory. I forgot. So now I'm going to read this again, and then I'm going to right into Dark Victory.
Yeah. I'm tempted for us just to like do a Dark Victory episode again.
We're gonna have,
I think we should, because even at the end there, you see that when he does bring multiple people into the, like you said, the supervillains into the office, we also see.
That's great.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
But we do get to see, a couple of. Actually, there's only one character that we see in this that hadn't otherwise been used in the book, and that's Penguin. Penguin, for some reason, is part of that splash page of villains. By the way, like it's up there. Like I love the splash page with the first time that Batman and Catwoman are fighting in front of the safe. That's really
beautiful
great.
spot. Yeah,
the one where Joker is in the plane and Batman is like leaning over him, saying "Land the plane." But that splash of the villains all like
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah,
sitting around the desk. Yeah. Oh, it's gorgeous. But it is one of those things where it's like they broke out Penguin for some reason. He has nothing to do with the entire book, but he's the only one in that spread that didn't have anything to do at all with the city, with the story, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Well, maybe Tim Sale's like, I want to draw the Penguin.
Yeah. No, I do. I think that sometimes. I think that sometimes what they decide to do. I like the banter between Scarecrow and Hatter. I think it's fun.
It's great. Yeah, all in rhyme, back and forth is great. Yeah,
but a great pairing too of those two villains. Yeah. Like, work fantastic together. Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say like with Tim Sale's work, except it's amazing. The splash pages are amazing. The storytelling that he does is amazing, and the negative space. Yeah, it's even the black and whites. Like there is a lot of contrast in color. There's a lot of just monotones for some of those pages to bring the point across, and
Yeah, and all the murder scenes take place in black and white. And there's I think when
most of them, I think sometimes we get some red in there because of the blood.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh yeah, when the elder Moroni is lying in his tomato in his garden, he's wearing his red tie, and that's like the
and what's his name in the tub? The first murder when he's in the tub, it turns red.
Yes. Turns red, yes. So
yeah.
It's brilliant use of color. Just to strike the mood, yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like I said, I feel like we have to do Dark Victory.
I know. I mean, I agree because I think we get again. I mean, some of those things still stay true. I think I'd have to go back, but I think we get more color in Dark Victory, and that's because of Robin.
Yeah.
That Tim Sale, once we introduce Robin, we get more color. Although, I mean, we get some here, but we get more characters. We get different characters. I like that it's a reverse game. Now it's actually a game. It's Hangman. But the victims that are being picked out, it's really nice. It's really good storytelling.
How far after Long Halloween does Dark Victory pick up? Do you remember? Does anyone remember?
It's only a couple of years. It can only be several years because it's after Sophia Gigante goes and gets surgery the reconstructive surgery after
Okay.
the whole thing with Catwoman at the end of Long
Yeah.
Halloween when she falls and Catwoman's bola causes her to become disfigured.
Right. Okay. Because this is like we have year one, we have Long Halloween, and then I guess a couple of years later would be when you would introduce Robin in a
Right.
theoretical timeline
Right.
Mhm.
where Batman's a little bit more mature and a little bit older and starts taking on a sidekick. So okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's what I'd have to double check. I mean, for all I know, I'm going to look up and it'll be like 10 years later, but I'm pretty sure it's only supposed to be like several years later. You guys said you had some questions too. Did you have questions beyond
I think we answered.
who is?
Well, my main question was how many holiday killers were, but so I think that's been answered.
Yeah, there were 3 of them. Yeah.
There was three, yes, and I completely forgot that. Um, I just thought it was Harvey Dent. I forgot about Gilda,
hmm
and Alberto was completely off my radar. I figured he's
It's
the
See,
only.
I thought it was Gilda and Alberto. I didn't realize Harvey was actually like I just got lost. I thought it was like two because Batman says there was two, but there was really three.
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Anything else? Let me see about the notes. I think all the different things I wanted to say about the notes. Um, I just read recently. I got my books in. I get them once a month from Discount Comic Book Services. I just read Batman number 150, written by Chip Zdarsky, and oh boy, and you read that, and then you read this, and you realize, oh my God, look how the mighty have fallen. I.e., what they're putting out, especially with Batman, and it's like, um, I'm so glad that we're getting a new story from Jeff Loeb now. It's sad that Tim Sale can't be part of it, but I'm looking forward to a meaty Batman story that is not about people sitting around a table in a restaurant eating sushi for 5 pages in a Batman book. I can't deal with that.
Well, but I mean, we do get that. We get that here sometimes. I think it's just, I think you have to earn it.
Yeah,
You know, I think that when you're looking at conversations sitting around a table like that, I think it can work just fine. It's just you have to earn it, and it has to feel like it's part of the storytelling and not just taking a
right.
breath for no reason, right? And
Got to
so,
move the plot
I
along.
and I think it's tough. I think storytelling is hard, and I think I go back to what I've said before, which is one of the reasons I mostly left comic books behind. Excuse me. Besides the increase in cost,
Mm.
was that my favorite stories end,
Yeah.
and comic books don't do that, right?
No, they don't
So
do
I
that.
think
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest things about Batman is when you're looking at a guy who's got 85 years of history behind him. That's nuts. That's so much history, right? So it's hard to tell these stories. So like Long Halloween is great, but like, and I'm glad that we get a story after that, right? And I'm glad we're gonna get another one. But if all I had was Long Halloween, great, sign me up. Like if that's how it ends, I think that's a great story, and I think that's the problem with a lot of these other stories is that they need to be written into continuity. And there is an element of, we talked about this with Jeremy Adams. He always tries to put the toys back in the toy box when he's done. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry if anybody can hear Eli crying in the background. He's like
Uh-huh.
downstairs. He's howling. I'm not sure what's it. He's fine, but
Maybe he's watching the Yankee game.
that's it, Joe. You nailed it. Or he's lamenting how long it is till hockey season starts.
Right?
Or
Yeah.
Christina just told him we're going to miss the Blues home opener because we're going to be out of town.
Oh no.
Or
But
someone told him he has to watch the Jets or something like that.
yeah,
Oh God
there
forbid!
you
Don't
go.
put that on the child, please. No, don't. Just cry for life.
Right. That's the bridge too far. That's the line
Yeah,
you should never have crossed. No, but I think I think that's the thing about Long Halloween. I like that it has an ending. I like that if this is all you ever read of Batman, Batman's a great character, right? And so when we're talking about, that's what I was saying. Is so with Jeremy Adams, he was saying put the toys back in the toy box, and there's something about that the three of us said we liked, right? We like that. It's not somebody who's looking to make his mark on the Flash by destroying the Flash and tearing him down.
Mm.
We like that. But the problem with putting all the toys back in the toy box is the story doesn't end that way. It can't, right? Because we haven't seen any permanent, in so many ways, we haven't seen any permanent change. And we see that in Long Halloween. We see this, how, like you said earlier, James, Gotham City is now run by the freaks instead of the mobsters, right? We see the death of the mob. We see the death of a lot of mobsters. We
Mm.
see Harvey Dent become Two-Face. So there is some permanent there's some permanent damage done here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Very much so.
and so I think at that point, that to me makes it really compelling, and I think it makes it hard to write a compelling Batman story uh, in continuity, is because so many of the toys you do have to put back, and there's so much you have to think like, oh, he did this, he did that, so we can't do this, we can't use that villain. That villain was killed off, right? So like, there's an element of like, oh, I wish there were more toys in the toy box, and people would put them back, but also there's no impact. It's hard to make an impact on the world
Yeah,
of that
you
character.
you use the toys for 85 years. It's hard. Some of them are falling apart.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and people buy new toys. They introduce new toys, and sometimes they just suck, and that's okay. That happens because it's hard. It's hard to make a toy that's gonna last, right? But even Christina and I went to go see Deadpool and Wolverine last night,
Oh,
and we enjoyed it. But there was a trailer for the second Joker movie, and I'm disgusted by that
oh,
because
that's the musical, right? Going to be a
uh,
musical in the second Joker film? That's what
I
I heard.
I just all I
That's
know
what I
is
heard. Yeah, yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix again and Lady
Um,
Gaga, and
Lady
which
Gaga,
like
no,
I hear like she's a great actor, but I just it's elevating the Joker to this level of like anti-hero, and it's like no,
no,
he's a
he's
psychopath.
he's
He's
a
a
psychopath.
psychopath, and we don't need to examine him more closely. We don't need to do that. It's one of the things I really appreciated about the Dark Knight is he never talks. He lies constantly about how he got the scars. There's nothing redeeming
Yeah,
about the character. There cannot be anything redeeming about this character, right? And
And there shouldn't
so,
be.
and there shouldn't
no,
be exactly. So I think it's hard to make toys that can last this long, because you're right, 85 years is a long time to have toys. Even honestly, even 20 years is a long time to have toys that you play with regularly. So I don't know, I feel like I'm
And sometimes they just don't make new toys the way they made the old toys either. So
yeah,
well,
yeah, they
my,
just don't
my
make them
Gumby
like
would
they used to, huh? They
my
yeah,
never made
Gumbies
them
would
like this.
my Gumbies would barely last a week until the wire inside him snapped, and then they just
Yeah, yeah.
you put on pokey, he falls off.
This is also the curse of go back again, go into the Dark Knight for more material. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
The villain, yeah.
In this case, Batman's been around for 85 years. At some point, the bad stories are going to outnumber the good.
Yeah,
There's
well,
just
that's what's
there isn't
happening now.
much that they haven't done with him before.
yeah. I mean, also, just going to the ending, like we have three good endings for Batman, depending on what you like. You have the Dark Knight, you have Kingdom Come, and you
Mhm.
have Batman Beyond. Like those are three solid endings that
Since you
exist
mentioned
for
Batman Beyond,
depending on
yes,
how you like your Batman. Like choose one of those. like
yeah,
you know,
I'll
and we
choose.
even have
I'll
the
choose Batman
extended.
Beyond.
Yeah, if you can do the extended cut where they give the ending to Batman Beyond and Justice League Unlimited, where you can have an even further extension of Batman's ending. So
That's just it.
um,
I'm saturated for the most part. I'm saturated on good Batman stories. It's hard to find one that's going to top these, and so by definition, a lot of them can't measure up, right? Which is not really fair to them. It's not fair to the creators. I don't know how you top some of this storytelling. I just don't.
Yeah,
yeah,
very
well,
difficult.
I mean, the thing, like we said that would never happen is like if you don't have a really good story or compelling story or something that may live up to the legacy, like maybe it's time to shelve the character for a little bit.
Well,
Like
they
just
they almost did that in the early 1960s. DC was actually considering canceling Batman, and then the TV show came out, and one of the few times in modern history where a live action version of a comic book character actually translated into sales, because none of these movies, even from the beginning of the MCU, people don't go into a comic book store and buy an Iron Man comic book or a Spider Man comic book because they saw it on the film, in live action. But I went to the day after I saw the Batman 66 premiere in January of 1966. I went out and bought a Batman. I also bought a Superman comic that day too. I bought a Batman and a Superman comic. That thing got me to go to the store, spin the rack around. Ah, Batman. Oh, Superman. I've been watching that. George Reeves. Take that home too. But yeah, there was a time when Batman was just about to be, the parlance of this story, two to the back of the head.
yeah. Well, he'll probably never go back in the box like that again. Continuing your toy analogy, I don't think their Batman will ever get put in the box and put on the shelf. At least in
Well, it's interesting because arguably he's becoming less and less relevant, right? Because you're talking about a character who one of his biggest advantages was his like cool gadgets, and ultimately there's not much he has now without going to the realm of complete fantasy that like American police and military don't have.
Don't already have. That's a good point. Yeah.
Right? So you're talking about like when he has the tumbler in
Yeah.
Batman Begins, it's like the police know what that is. It's a tank. It's a better tank than they have, but they have tanks, right? Like the gadgets that he has, we see the police have those gadgets too. It's another reason I actually like Long Halloween is because it's not just about the gadgets. You see some of the gadgets, but I think that's why we see Batman Gotham is sort of gothic in setting, is to make sure that like the technology that the police have access to doesn't outstrip that of Batman, and certainly not match it, right? So
I mean, as
arguably,
great as
go ahead.
I mean, I was saying, I mean, it really, like, again, depending on the writer, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, like, his greatest skill is his prowess, his determination, and his mind. That's Batman.
Yeah.
Like, the gadgets, like, help him, I guess, navigate faster, and, like, the gadgets help him do that, but, like, you know, his mind is I mean, he is the, I don't know if that's changed, Joe, but he's the world's greatest detective, at least, or he was. I don't know if somebody else is the world's
No,
greatest detective.
there's more that now. The other people in the DC universe have that title now, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
We only see the Batmobile briefly in this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Do we see the Batcave at all?
Yes, he has everything laid out. Up the sixth. I think he has everything laid out. The trinkets.
Right, yes,
and
but But to Chris's point, and your point, James too, James, it's a gadgetless Batman, which is what I like that Batman. It's the Batman I remember from the late '60s, early '70s was the Batman who had a Batmobile and a Batrobe, and just struck quickly from the shadows and then melted back into the shadows, and he was the Batman, not Batman. No, you're not familiar with oh look, it's Batman walking down. No. You see that guy coming down the street at night, you're gonna. If you're not a bad guy, you're still going to cross to the other side and run like hell in the other direction. So he's the Batman, and he's very much the Batman in this story.
Yeah, I agree. So, well, I don't know what we have more to say about the Long Halloween, except looks like we have to do Dark Victory next. So
Yeah.
I think so. But
I'm going to check my bookshelf before I look for the comic books for Dark Victory. Maybe that's on the bookshelf too.
I mean, that'd be good because I don't know if the final Halloween is going to be individual issues or a complete story. I don't know how they're releasing it, but be good for we'll do the whole trilogy. Well, I mean, technically, there's more than the whole trilogy because there's the Catwoman.
It's the Catwoman. I think it's called When in Rome or something like that.
Rome.
It's interesting, but it's not like a must read. But it's interesting, and then I will say that reading the three stories that Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did about Batman before the Long Halloween that led Archie Goodwin to saying, hey, we all should do. Those are interesting too, but again, not must reads. So if we want to like sort of talk about like Long Halloween adjacent, we can. But I don't think it's strictly necessary. And for audience members, if you're just really loving this world and these characters, yeah, go read those books, right? They're lovely. But don't feel like you need to, or you're missing out on something, right? You get everything you need to from Long Halloween, and before that from Year One, Long Halloween, and Dark Victory.
Yeah, I think they got collected in a trade called Haunted Nights. I think that's the trade.
That sounds right.
Yeah. So, audience. Yeah, audience. We have talked about Long Halloween. We are going to do Dark Victory, and then at some point when it becomes available on Hoopla, or maybe we'll decide to buy it because we will buy these things. We will do Final Halloween, and but of course I could not do this episode without my two other hosts. So thank you, Joe.
You're welcome, James.
And thank you, Chris.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad we finally did this. It's weird. It's like you said, we've talked about it enough times. It didn't occur to me that we hadn't actually done an episode about it yet.
Exactly.
So, we pointed that out.
It took almost 3 years to get to it.
3 years. Well, we still have a lot of topics to get to. there's still the topics from our first year that we still haven't touched upon. So we'll get their audience. But listening audience, if you've enjoyed this episode of The Long Halloween, we'd love to hear from you in the Facebook group when I make the post. So you can put that there. We're on Instagram at Secret Origins MC, where I post when these episodes are coming out. I'm going posting pictures of Joe's epic comic collection that he shares with me. So if you want to see Joe's comics and some cool covers, go there. And we thank you for listening, and we will talk to you on the next episode.